Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com with another video on programming techniques. This is one's going to be about closures. So the idea of closures is basically playing with a function scope to have access to certain data that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. So first, let's just explain why this matters. Because in a function, variables that are sort of declared in a function only exist within the function. So if I were to create a function, my func equals this. Okay, and then I were to do const my var equals 5. Okay. So let's run my func. My func equals 5, and then do this console.log my var. Okay, save. Okay, so in this situation, what's going to happen is that my var only exists within the function. The function will already complete its running before it moves on to line 6. So my var should not exist anymore, and this should throw me an error saying my var is not defined. So let's test that out. Node function.js, and see my var is not defined. Because the minute this is done, this variable disappears from life. Closures offer you sort of a way to kind of get around that. So that means, so let's say I decide to return a function. Just return a function that then does console log my var. Okay. So now what happens? So instead, what I'm going to do is my func, and I'm going to actually console.log. Oh no, not console log. Const the func. We got the func. So basically, this function will run and return this function. Okay, and then let's say I just do like a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to do const cheese equals 1. Const cheese 2 equals 2. I'm going to console.log cheese and cheese 2. And then we're going to console log, or we're just going to run the func. And the reason I'm doing that is because by the time we get to the func, my func will have been long done. But because this function is defined within this function, my var is still within its scope. So even though technically I'm calling it somewhere completely differently, I still have access to that variable. Okay, so let's swatch. Okay, and there you go. See, I still have access to that 5 that was my var. Okay, very, very cool. So now we can do some cool stuff with this. Okay, this is kind of like this whole idea of closures, this idea of using functions within functions to access function data outside of the function is something that's used for something like a React hook. So if you're not familiar with React hook, basically the idea is, first we'll create the function. So const, we'll call it my fake hook, because it's a fake version of hook. And that's going to equal a function. Okay. And basically what this function is going to do, it has a variable. So we're going to call my var. And actually it does take a parameter. We're going to say, hey, you're initializing your data. We'll call it your initial state. Just initial. Okay, so we're going to say const state equals initial. Okie dokie, and that doesn't look right. I need the arrow. There we go. Equals initial. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return a function we're actually going to return an array, the first variable being state, and then the second variable being a function that takes in new data, so new data, and then takes the state and changes it to that new data variable value and doesn't return anything. Okay, so it basically returns this array with this value in this function. This is essentially what the useState hook for the most part does. Now again, this is not going to work exactly the way we'd like it to, and we'll show you why in a moment. Okay, so basically the way, if you've used the useState hook in React before, okay, what you would do is you would use array destructuring. So I would be like, okay, this is my state, this is my setState function, and that's going to equal the result of fake hook. And my initial state is going to be the number 5. Okay. Okay, so then we're going to console.log state, and then I'm going to try to change. Then the setState function is supposed to be able to change the state. So I'm going to set the state now to 6. And then I'm going to console.log state again and see if I'm able to change it. See if that setState function actually changes it. Okay? And let's think about why that would work. Because this function is created within, since this function is created within the fake hook function, it still has access to this scope. So it still has access to this variable state. Now, one problem I already see is that this is a const variable, so it can't be reassigned. So I'm probably gonna get an error just based on that. So let's run that first. Okay, so we got that error. Okay, let's see what happens if I change this to let, and we don't have the constant thing problem anymore. Okay, so if you hear some chirping on my shoulders, because my bird just flew into the room and decided to spend some time with me. So let's see here, node functions.js. Now, see what happened here is that yes, the state value got 5. So basically it returns this array, and then this array gets destruction to this variable gets called state. But at that point, it gets decoupled from this original state value. Why? Because it's passed into a single variable, and a single variable is passed by value, not by reference. Okay? So even though I'm modifying, I can use this function fake hook to modify state, and just to show you that it does get modified, I'll console log the state variable within this function. So let me just run that. Okay, so you can see I do change it to 6 inside the function, but it doesn't change it outside. Okay, so how can I fix this? Now, one way I could fix this is I could maybe put the initial state in an array. Okay, and then I pass that array instead of, so I just pass the array. Okay, so then what happens is that it's just an array with the value 5, which it will change. So watch what'll happen, because arrays are passed by reference. So meaning I'm not making a copy of the array. It's referring to that original array created in the function. So then it will change. Okay. Oh, not what I expected to happen. Let me think about that for a second. State. Oh, because I reassigned it into. What I should have done is done this. 0 state 0, so it changes that first element of the array to the new data. So if I do that, save, that should do the trick. Okay, so there, that worked. So see, originally it was 5. So when I do fake hook, state is 5. And then when I run the setState function and change it to 6, it actually changes the value of state to 6. Because it's in an array. An array is referenced. But that's still not necessarily what we want. Because in React, you're not using the value within an array like this. So the way I think that works, I think you have to do another closure. You have to do another function. So let me think about how that will work. So let's date. So let's see here. I think we have to declare another function, const. So I think we still need to declare this. We'll declare the variable. Let state equal. This is the part where I always get confused on how would we get this effect. So I can easily do this with an array or an object. It makes easy pass as a reference. I might have to go take a peek. Okay, so I'll show you one more variation of a solution, and then I'll show you kind of how it's done in React. So another solution we could do here. So let's state equal. Let's keep it. Let's state equals 5. Okay, the other solution you could do. Let's see where I'm at here. What you do is you make state equal a function. So state will also equal a function. We'll set the value here. So actually we'll do const let state equal initial. Then we'll call this get state. And then get state, basically what it does, it just returns state. Save. Okay, now that's all within this closure. Basically, so instead of state being just a standalone variable, now it's a getter function. It's going to go get, because basically the first parameter being passed in from this. Oh, this has got to be changed to get state. Not there. Where are we doing this? Here we go. So now we're returning an array where where it's two functions: get state and set state. So it's a getter and setter function. And now this is gonna end up holding a function. So now I do this, it'll work. It'll do exactly what I want it to do. Okay. So if I hit save, and then actually let me change this. It's no longer going to be an array. Yep. Cool. So now it should do what I want it to do. See, so originally it's 5, and then I use the set state function to change it to 6, and then it comes back as 6. This is great, but when you're using React, that's not exactly how this looks like. You don't have to use a function to set and get. The reason being is that the actual when you're using useState hooks or hooks in React, technically everything is within another function, the component, the functional component. So then you have this sort of scoping in there. They basically have other mechanisms where it's declaring variables within that parent function that is the component that gives you the scope to be able to use the state within the component. So that's sort of the reason why React is able to kind of have the exact effect that it does without necessarily wrapping it in another sort of bigger component function. These are sort of the two ways you can get around that. So you can either do the getter setter functions, always have the data in an object or an array. Either one of those would essentially achieve the desired effect. Far as, you know, basically having this function that can change this data, similar to sort of how the state hook works. So that kind of ended up going on in a little off the beaten path. But the point is you can create these patterns where you can access data from within a function and use functions as stores of data, which is a kind of a neat pattern. Okay, so that's the idea of closures. Okay, and you can create patterns like the useState function. So just to recap, the whole thing about a closure is basically you're just basically using child functions to take advantage of the scoping of certain data within another function to do cool data stuff. Okay. Like, let's see if we were to create a more interesting example. One more example, and then we'll call this a day. So we'll call this const function treasure chest. Okay. It equals. Okay. And we'll just say the initial deposit of gold inside the treasure chest. Okay, and we're just gonna say, hey, let value equal initial deposit. Okay. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to make it where I can access, change that value or add. Okay, so we'll create a function called drop coin or deposit coin. Okay, that should be a const. Okay, and what this does, it's just going to equal. And basically all that does is just take value and add 1 to it. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing here and do a withdraw coin. And I mean, yes, you're basically using your function almost like an object. Is essentially what you're essentially doing here. And I'm doing this with an arrow function. Like old school ES5 functions were actually built to be used as objects. These are not, and you can still kind of have the same effect using closures. Const count coin. Okay, equals. Okay, a console.log value. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to return an array with these 3 functions. So return an array with deposit coin, withdraw coin, count coin. Okay, cool. So now I've just created a treasure chest functionally. Nice. Okay, and now I can be like my chest const this, so it'll be basic const deposit withdraw count equals treasure chest, and our initial deposit in our treasure chest will be 6. Okay, so first we'll count the coins so you can see that the coins, how many coins we have in there to begin with. Then we'll deposit twice. So that should bring us up to 8 coins. So we'll count the coins again. And then I am going to withdraw. Okay, and then that should bring us down to 7. And then I'm going to count the coins again to make sure that's the case. So basically we should see 6, 8, 7. That's what it should console log. And see, I'm manipulating this value variable that's inside the function, which the function has already ran. So the function technically should all that stuff should be garbage collected. But because of closures, I'm able to sit there and manipulate that data, continue getting it, setting it, which is cool. Let's see, 6, 8. Oh wait, I didn't put decrement over here, did I? I forgot to change this to decrement. Save. And let's run that again. There you go, 6, 8, 7. Okay, so see, it's literally almost operating like an object, but it's literally just an arrow function, which has complete separation from an actual object. I'm just taking advantage of the scoping of the functions that I returned, because they're still going to have access to its parent function's values. That's the closure game. So technically, I'm able now to play with a function. Able to play with data that technically should be out of scope in a sense. Okay, I shouldn't be able to sit there and just play with that value like I am here, but I can. Very neat. Okay, and you mix that with other concepts like currying and high order functions, you start doing really cool stuff. Okay, so hopefully this makes closures make more sense. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy. And yes, I do realize in hindsight, I probably should have just done this analogy from the beginning. So have a great one.